They thought they could humiliate a man for no reason other than the color of his skin. Two cops, full of arrogance and prejudice, arrested him without knowing the truth. But when the courtroom doors opened, their mistake became the most humiliating moment of their lives, and what happened next left everyone speechless. This isn't just another story about bad cops abusing their power. It's a story about karma, justice, and the danger of making assumptions. Two officers saw a black man walking down the street and thought he was an easy target. They mocked him, they insulted him, and they arrested him like he was nobody. Little did they know they had just picked the wrong fight. The courtroom was supposed to be their victory lap, but it became the scene of their ultimate downfall. Stay tuned, this story only gets better. It all started on a quiet morning in a small, unassuming town. The streets were mostly empty, save for a few pedestrians going about their day. Two white police officers, Officer Ryan and Officer Blake, were patrolling the area more out of routine than necessity. That's when they spotted him, a black man casually walking down the sidewalk, minding his own business. To most people, he would have been just another person out and about. But to these officers, he was something else entirely. "What's he doing around here?" Ryan muttered, his tone already dripping with suspicion. Blake nodded in agreement. "Probably up to no good," he replied. They pulled the squad car over and stepped out, their posture aggressive and their intentions clear. "Hey, you stop right there," Ryan barked, his hand hovering near his holster. The man stopped and turned to face them, calm and unbothered. "Is there a problem, officers?" he asked, his voice steady but polite. Ryan scoffed. "Yeah, you're acting suspicious. What are you doing in this neighborhood?" "I live here," the man replied simply. But his answer didn't satisfy them. They accused him of loitering, of being out of place, of being a threat, anything to justify their actions. The man, however, didn't argue. He didn't resist or raise his voice. Instead, he stood there quietly, letting them dig their own hole. The situation escalated quickly. Ryan and Blake, frustrated by the man's composure, decided to arrest him. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," Blake ordered. "For what?" the man asked, still calm, but now with a faint smile on his lips. "Don't play games with us," Ryan snapped. Without waiting for an answer, they cuffed him, ignoring the murmurs of bystanders who had started to gather. At the station, things only got worse. Ryan and Blake seemed to enjoy their power trip, making snide comments and mocking the man as they processed him. "Bet you thought you were too good for this, huh?" Blake sneered. The man remained silent, his expression unreadable. It was as if he knew something they didn't, something that would change everything. By now the officers were so confident in their actions that they decided to press charges and take him to court. To them, this was an open and shut case, just another day of enforcing the law as they saw fit. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that the man they had arrested wasn't just some random guy. He wasn't a criminal, or a loiterer, or anyone they had the right to treat this way. He was their superior. The man was Chief Michael Davis, the head of the local police department, and he was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. What happened in that courtroom would leave everyone stunned, turning the tables in the most unexpected way possible. The courtroom was packed. The two officers, Ryan and Blake, sat confidently at the prosecution table, their smug expressions showing they believed they were about to secure a routine victory. After all, they had arrested a suspicious black man who had no business walking through that neighborhood, or so they thought. The man they arrested, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, entered the room with a calm, commanding presence. The courtroom went silent, the air suddenly heavy with anticipation. People in the gallery whispered among themselves, sensing that this wasn't going to be an ordinary case. When the judge asked for introductions, Ryan and Blake stood up proudly, each ready to testify about how they had upheld the law. But before they could begin, the man they had arrested spoke up. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to introduce myself," he said, his voice steady and authoritative. He turned to face the courtroom, his eyes scanning the room before landing on the officers. "My name is Michael Davis. I am the chief of police for this district." You could hear a pin drop. Ryan and Blake froze, their confidence evaporating in an instant. Their smug smiles were replaced by wide eyes and slack jaws as the weight of their mistake hit them like a ton of bricks. The gallery erupted into whispers, and even the judge raised an eyebrow in surprise. Chief Davis continued, "These two officers arrested me without cause, subjected me to insults, and mocked me while I was in their custody. They assumed I was guilty based on nothing but the color of my skin. Today I am here not just to defend myself, but to hold them accountable for their actions." The tension in the room was palpable as Chief Davis began to lay out the events of that day with precision and clarity. He described how the officers had profiled him, how they had escalated the situation unnecessarily, and how they had ignored his dignity at every turn. But he didn't stop there. Witnesses were called, bystanders who had seen the arrest and heard the officers' comments. Their testimonies painted a damning picture of Ryan and Blake's behavior. "They called him boy," one witness recounted. "They said things like, 'Let's see how tough you are now.' It was disgusting." The officers tried to defend themselves, claiming they had acted out of caution and protocol, but their arguments fell flat. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Chief Davis, maintaining his calm demeanor, addressed the courtroom directly. "This is not just about me," he said. "This is about a system that allows prejudice to go unchecked. If someone in my position can be treated this way, imagine what happens to those who don't have a title or a platform." As he finished speaking, the officers sat silently, their heads hung low. The courtroom was no longer theirs to control. The power had shifted entirely, and there was no turning back. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Chief Michael Davis had just delivered his testimony, a calm yet powerful recounting of the blatant injustice he endured. His words were a stark reminder of the prejudice that still plagued the very system he had sworn to uphold. The two officers, Ryan and Blake, who once carried themselves with arrogance, now sat frozen, their faces betraying their panic and disbelief. The judge adjusted his glasses, leaning forward as he addressed the officers directly. "Officers Ryan and Blake, I'm struggling to understand a justification for your actions that day. You claimed this man was acting suspiciously. On what grounds exactly?" Ryan cleared his throat, his voice shaky. "Your Honor, we believe, based on our experience, he matched the description of someone reported in the area." Chief Davis raised an eyebrow, but remained silent, letting them dig their own grave. The judge frowned. "And this description, did it include anything beyond his race?" "Well, he looked like he didn't belong in that neighborhood," Ryan stammered. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. A few people audibly gasped. Blake tried to interject, but the judge held up a hand to silence him. "Officers, you mean to tell me your entire basis for arresting this man was that he looked like he didn't belong?" the judge asked, his tone sharp. Blake leaned forward, his voice defensive. "Your Honor, it wasn't just that. He didn't answer our questions right away. He was being evasive." Chief Davis finally spoke up, his calm voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Your Honor, I wasn't being evasive. I simply asked them why I was being stopped. I believe every citizen has the right to know that." The judge nodded. "Indeed they do." Turning back to the officers, he added, "And that's far from a valid reason to detain someone, let alone arrest them. Do you have anything else to add?" The room was silent as the officers exchanged a panicked glance. It was clear they had nothing substantial to offer. The prosecution called for the next witness, a woman who had been walking her dog near the scene of the arrest. She approached the stand, her expression a mix of anger and resolve. After being sworn in, she recounted the events. "I was walking my dog that morning when I saw the officers approach the man," she began. "He wasn't doing anything wrong, just walking down the street. But they treated him like he was a criminal from the start. They shouted at him, insulted him, and when he didn't immediately act submissive, they cuffed him. "What kind of insults?" the prosecutor asked. "They called him boy. They said things like, 'Let's see you act tough now.' It was disgusting," she said, her voice cracking slightly. Ryan and Blake looked down at the table, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. The defense tried to discredit her testimony, but the damage was done. Another witness took the stand, a man who had been sitting in his car nearby. His testimony aligned perfectly with the first witness's account. "They didn't even try to talk to him like a normal person," he said. "It was obvious they had already decided he was guilty of something before they even spoke to him. The evidence was overwhelming." Every testimony painted the same picture: two officers abusing their authority and letting their biases dictate their actions. Then came the moment that shifted the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. Chief Davis requested to address the court directly. The judge granted him permission, and he stood his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. "Your Honor," he began, "I've served as a police officer for over 20 years. I've worked my way up from the bottom, dedicating my life to protecting and serving this community. I've seen the best and worst of humanity, both on the streets and within the ranks of law enforcement. And yet, despite my position, I am not immune to the prejudice that poisons our society." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room was silent, every eye fixed on him. "What happened to me is not an isolated incident," he continued. "It's a symptom of a larger problem, a culture that allows bias and prejudice to thrive unchecked. These officers didn't see me as a person. They didn't see a colleague, a fellow officer, or even just a man walking home. They saw a stereotype. And that assumption led them to humiliate, insult, and arrest me without cause." He turned to face Ryan and Blake, his voice steady but firm. "You didn't just disrespect me. You disrespected the badge, the oath we all take, and the community we're supposed to serve. Your actions didn't just harm me, they undermined the trust that people place in us as law enforcement officers." The officers shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet his gaze. Chief Davis addressed the judge again. "Your Honor, I'm not here to seek personal revenge. I'm here to ensure that justice is served, not just for me, but for everyone who has ever been treated unfairly by those who are supposed to protect them. This is an opportunity to show that no one, not even police officers, is above accountability." The courtroom erupted into applause, a rare but spontaneous show of support. The judge quickly restored order, but even he seemed moved by Chief Davis's words. In his closing remarks, the prosecutor emphasized the importance of upholding justice and holding law enforcement accountable. The defense offered a weak argument, claiming the officers had acted out of caution and protocol, but it was clear they had already lost. The judge, his face stern, delivered his ruling. "Officers Ryan and Blake, your actions on that day were not just unprofessional, they were a disgrace to the badge you wear. I am ordering an internal investigation into your conduct, and until its conclusion, you are both suspended without pay." The officers slumped in their seats, their humiliation complete. Chief Davis's calm demeanor never wavered as he left the courtroom, his head held high. Outside reporters swarmed him, but he simply said, "Let this be a lesson. Justice and accountability must apply to everyone, no matter their position." The story made headlines, sparking debates about systemic bias and the need for reform in law enforcement. Chief Davis didn't just win a personal battle, he ignited a broader conversation, proving that even in the face of injustice, dignity and courage can pave the way for change. In the end, justice wasn't just served, it was a wake-up call for everyone in that courtroom and beyond. Chief Davis proved that arrogance and prejudice can crumble when faced with truth and integrity. The two officers, blinded by their biases, learned the hard way that their actions had consequences, especially when their victim turned out to be someone who commanded respect far beyond their understanding. This wasn't just about one man, it was about standing up to a broken system and demanding accountability. Chief Davis's calm but firm response showed the power of resilience and the importance of holding people to their actions, no matter their position. Never miss stories like this. Hit subscribe, and let's dive into the next one. This story is not real. This story is only for educational and entertainment purposes.